So it's Ecce, and welcome to our video about ablative absolutes. We're going to talk about what this means. It's a new type of subordinate clause that uses the case we know as, you guessed it, the ablative. Let's go ahead and dive right into it. Let's go ahead and compare these two sentences. Sextus verba grammatici audivit sed manum non extended. That's Sextus heard the words of the teacher, but he did not extend his hand. This we remember from a couple chapters ago, when Sextus was being a little bit sleepy and not paying too much attention. Now, if you notice, the second sentence has a lot of similarity with the first one. For example, we've got Sextus here, manum not extended, manum not extended. So that much of the sentence has stayed the same. What's changed is this section right here. But it's really saying pretty much the same thing. What this is saying, this is an ablative absolute. This is saying after the words of the school teacher had been heard. This auditus, I wonder if you can pinpoint what this looks like. It's an adjective built from a verb. This is a triple P. The words of the teacher, having been heard, Sextus did not extend his hand. Let's see another example. So this one, Titus pecuniam dedit et deinde venum bibit. Right? Titus gave money and then he drank wine. The second sentence, as you'll notice, has many of the same elements. Titus, venum bibit. Okay? There is a change here. Okay? This data here, again, another PPP, having been given. So we're going to translate this one. With the money having been given, Titus drank wine. See another example. Alright, this one I want to chunk out. So let's go ahead and find our subject. Pueri is our subject. And since that's plural with the I, I'm going to go ahead and look for a plural verb. And the sign of the plural verb is probably going to be an NT. So our subject, our verb is right here. Looks like we've got another subject over here. And the verb, this one is singular, so instead this time it's going to be singular. We've also got a noun adjective here. Grammaticus ieratus. So that's double dipping there. And finally we have a prepositional phrase, in ludo. Now, again, a lot of the same elements exist in our second sentence, but they've been changed around a little bit. We still have a subject and a verb here. And we've still got a noun adjective here. But you'll notice pueris is no longer a subject. Pueri is a fine subject, that's fine, but pueris is no longer a subject. And clemantibus is no longer a straight verb, that is now a present active participle, the ing ending. So, this first sentence is going to say something like, the boys were shouting, remember we have a BA here, were shouting in school, and the teacher was becoming angry. The second sentence says something very similar, but since this is a subordinate clause, we can add some things here that might make it a little more sense. So we could say something like, we apply how we do those cum clauses here. We can add in one of the translations for cum. We could use when, since, although. These are all fine translations. But let's go with the straight ing form. And this, we want to keep the sense of it very similar to the first sentence. So in here we're going to say, let's go with, I think with is a good general translation, but you might want to use one that makes a little more sense. Here we can use with and start off with that. So with the boys shouting in school, the teacher was becoming angry. Or you could apply one of these other translations. When the boys are shouting in school, the teacher was becoming angry. You could say since the boys are shouting in school, the teacher is becoming angry. That's also a fine translation. Although, it would be a special kind of teacher who would be angry although the boys were shouting. That would be a little bit different. That would have it if perhaps they said that the boys were quiet. Although the boys were quiet in school, the teacher was becoming angry. That would make sense. But here I think because or since or any of those translations is going to be fine. Although it might not work here. Let's look at this one. Take a moment and try to chunk this out. And see if you can name the chunks before I do. Poor Euclides. So in this sentence here, this is saying that Euclides had collapsed, or has collapsed, excuse me. Euclides has collapsed in the mud, and the robbers, laughing, went away. Compare that to our second sentence. We have a subject, we have a verb, we have a noun adjective. So none of that has changed, but this first half has. Again, we've got our ablative endings, E and O. So let's use with, or although. With Euclides having collapsed, this is a triple P. Having collapsed into the mud, in the mud. Euclides having collapsed in the mud. The robbers went away laughing. Although Euclides had collapsed, had fallen in the mud, Euclides were laughing, went away. That's also fine translation. Kind of highlights the difference between these two guys. Alright, now that we've looked at some examples, you got to know what's going on with the ablative case. So here's what happens with the ablative absolute. It takes two independent clauses and kind of subordinates one into the ablative with a participle instead of having them be parallel. Here, these two are on the same level. They're going along, they're the same level. But these ones, right here, one is subordinate to the other. So this one is the main idea. The stuff not in the ablative is the main idea. And then the other stuff is, we can call it circumstance. It is the circumstance in which the main stuff happens. So we take this blue stuff, whereabout grammatiki audiuit, and we change that into an ablative absolute to make it circumstantial, to make it the stuff that the main stuff happens around. So you see we've taken that clause and we've changed it into ablative absolute, and we'll move the rest of the sentence down now so it reads like this. We'll do the same thing with the other sentence. We'll take pecuniam, date it, and make it a ablative absolute. Make it not he gave the money, but now it's after the money had been given, or with the money having been given, Titus drank the wine. A key thing to remember, I'm sure you're asking, why would they use this instead of a cum clause? Well, answer number one is because it's a little more succinct. You are using often shorter phrases to do it in a subordinate clause. The other reason is that the noun in an ablative absolute is not connected to the rest of the sentence. It is not going to be something about, if the boys are in this part of the sentence for an ablative absolute, they will not be in this part of the sentence. They are disconnected. They are absolutely not connected to the sentence. Here we've moved that first clause here into an ablative absolute, pueris. Now we've disconnected it from the main sentence. And now we've just moved the rest of the sentence down. Alright, so here's your need to know. You need to make sure you take this down in your notes. This is what you need to know about the ablative absolute. It is a subordinate or dependent idea to the main sentence. In those sentences we had, for examples, the two clauses were parallel. They were both independent, but now the ablative absolute will be a dependent idea. It will be unconnected to any other word in the sentence. That means it will not agree with anything in the sentence in genitive case. It will not be a clause connected with anything else. It is a subordinate, unconnected, independent clause. And it will usually be a noun adjective, sometimes with two nouns. For example, with Caesar being emperor, that could be a subordinate clause, or a noun and an adjective. But usually you're going to see it with a noun and a participle. That's all you need to know. See you in class.